Hi everybody, Sarah Batchelor here. I'm the Neuro-Spicy music teacher and I teach here in Alberta. I'm also a mom and a proud Canadian, a proud Albertan, and I am also a Christian. I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and I believe in salvation. And I actually really try. I know we all fail, but I really do try to live like Jesus. That is exactly why I'm so uncomfortable with the government using Jesus language in official communications. So this last week, I guess probably a little bit more than a week ago now, there was a letter sent out by the Minister of Education, and he used he talked about Christmas, he talked about Jesus, he talked about all sorts of religious things that I just really don't feel comfortable about having in a letter that goes to the public from the Minister of Education. Because I was like, isn't there supposed to be a separation between church and state? Because public is everybody, right? One of the reasons that I joined the LDS Church, the Mormon Church, was because they have such a focus on agency. And agency is the ability to make decisions for yourself. They will tell you things, but then they would say to you, okay, well, what do you think? You need to go pray about it. You need to go think about it. You need to come to your own conclusion. That is doing things right in my books, regardless of religion. I don't, in anything in life. I like that you have the ability to make your mind up for yourself. And I have the ability to make up my mind for myself, but that doesn't mean I have the ability to make up my mind for other people. So this is where, to me, it starts to feel uncomfortable, right? It's like, no, I firmly believe what I believe, and I believe I'm right, but I don't necessarily believe that means you're wrong. It means that you're different. I mean, the teachings of the church I belong to believe that the light of Christ is in everyone, so that everybody has that spark. Every human, we're all here, we're all children of God. We all have our own paths back to Him, but I'm not here to preach. I'm here to point out that that is my belief, and it doesn't have to be yours. And that's a beautiful thing, because that's what makes Canada so great. We have the freedom to believe what we want, right? And so this isn't about banning Christmas. This isn't about stopping people celebrating. It's about whether the state is using religion as messaging and whether the actions match the teachings being referenced. Some people I really, really respect who are Christians have been posting online, and I'm trying to think how to respond to them. So I think this is kind of it. Because yeah, I know what you believe and I know who you are and I know you're good people, and I can't believe that you're okay with what's happening. And I'd like to hear their perspective on it. I would love to have those conversations, but I'm going to start by sharing mine, right? So I was thinking about does Canada have a separation between church and state? Like, is that a rule? Is it a law? What is this? So in my research, I found out it doesn't have a single simple separation of church and state clause like the US does, okay? But we do have strong legal principle. The state must be religiously neutral. All right, religiously neutral. I love that. That sounds like exactly the kind of world I want to work in, right, and live in. Where we respect other people's belief systems. They're allowed to exist and coexist. As long as you're not hurting anybody else, you can do what you want, right? The Charter of Rights and Freedoms, as I've said before, works as far as my rights extend until my fist hits your nose. Then it stops. As soon as my rights impact you, that's not okay, right? And so part of the branding, and I will get to this later, is like, okay, everyone's okay, yeah, because it's a Christian thing, but I can't imagine any other religion that could be put into a government document letter like this and sent out that would be okay. Like if somebody of the Muslim faith had written this from their perspective, or the Jewish people about Hanukkah, or do you really honestly think that the general public would have been okay with it? And no, we're not. I mean, yes, we are a Christian nation because a lot of the people who settled here were Christian, right? But a lot of the people who live here now or moved here since are not, right? And so things evolve, things change. People move to this continent so that they could have religious freedom. And it really seems weird to me that they think that they are the only ones who should have religious freedom. That's not religious freedom. That's religious freedom for you, right? So they have this thing where they have to stay, they're supposed to be religiously neutral. The Supreme Court has said governments must not favor one belief over others in a way that excludes people. So when a government chooses explicitly Christian framing in an official message sent to all parents, well, what's to all parents, it was sent to school boards and things, I think, the questions becomes, is that neutral? And if not, then why? Why are you even doing it? Right? If you're just doing it like Nicolaitis, if you're just doing it, say, hey, I celebrate Christmas and I'm wishing you this blessed season. That's not how it came across, though. It was a little bit weird. So this matters because the Alberta's Minister of Education and Childcare sent a holiday greeting to parents province-wide. He posted it through public school boards using explicitly Christian language about the birth of Jesus and the nativity. To be clear, I'm not offended by Jesus. Big fan here. I love him. He's my friend. I mean, I have a very close relationship with him, and I just begin to wonder if I know the same person that other people know sometimes, right? What bothers me is the government is using Jesus in a message that goes to everyone through public institutions, right? So this isn't your personal Christmas card list. This is going to everyone, right? And I'm not saying you shouldn't say Merry Christmas. I just, go read the letter. It made me really uncomfortable, and it made me really sad because I believe what he's saying about Jesus and about how important it is for, to Jesus, the reason for this is not the place, right? Time and place, right? You are a public officer, right? No, the public is everybody, right? So if the state can do this for Christianity, we have to ask, would the same people be comfortable if that came from a different faith, right? And here's the test I want you to apply as we go through my points. Gently and honestly. And put in the comments if you disagree with me too, that's fine. But let's be kind about it because I'm not here to bash you. I'm here to just state my side of things, right? Because this isn't about you aren't allowed to say Merry Christmas, but it's, do your policies align with the teachings you're invoking? So if you're going to talk Jesus, let's see if you really are talking Jesus. Because Jesus believed in some pretty radical things. He believed in some things that are not ascribed to any one political party, but are just about being good humans, right? That was what Jesus was about. Jesus was about everybody. He wasn't just about his base, about his 12 supporters. He was about reaching everybody, right? And so there's this framework that's often referred to as the 9 key teachings of Jesus. And I'm going to pull from these. I'm not using a line, but the 9 are radical love, generosity, forgiveness, hospitality, action, service, justice, nonviolence, and simple living. Those are the 9 key teachings of Jesus Christ. And I don't think they're hard to accept. I mean, they're all good things, right? I'm not trying to use this as a weapon by any means, simply as a mirror. I just want us to reflect on what's happening in the world around us. They're saying that they believe in Jesus. Are these people actually, though? Is this what Jesus would do? Didn't they used to have bracelets that what would Jesus do or whatever? This is sort of what I want to think about. Because some of it I think they would, but some of it I think he wouldn't. I don't know. So let's talk about this a little more. So let's start with the idea of radical love and inclusive hospitality. Who feels safe? Who feels welcomed? Who feels protected? I don't know what else I have to say about that to say that, oh my gosh, right? Like, isn't that how it should be? A central Jesus question is this: who is protected, especially the vulnerable, right? So when we look at some of the things in the past, in 2024, Alberta announced a policy directing that, a policy that made it so that we as teachers had to notify parents if students under 16 used a new gender identity, related name or pronouns. So if I had a student whose name was Henry and they wanted to be Henrietta, I had to let their parents know, right? So supporters framed this as parental rights. Again, this is the same thing, religious rights, parental rights. These aren't just for you. You don't get to make the rules for other people's families. But it's framed as parental rights. It's a right as a parent to know that your child's going by a different name at school. My question would be, why don't you know that? I mean, why don't you know that? Do you not talk to your kids? Do you not see them? Do you not spend time driving them to events and hear them talk with their friends in the back seat and get all the, that's how I keep up on what's going on in the social world. My son, I just listen, right? Like, I think I would know. And if I didn't, it wouldn't be because he was keeping it from me, if that makes sense, right? Critics, including myself, have raised concerns about student safety and forced disclosure. Did you know that 80% of people on the streets under the age of 18 are members of the LGBTQ community? 80% of the homeless kids. Yeah, I have students who I know if their parents thought for 1 second that they were gay, they wouldn't have a roof over their heads. This is the world they live in. This is about safety. For me, that's not about that trumps. I don't care what you think. The kids have to be safe, right? They're probably not emotionally safe already if that's the situation they're living in, but that's just me being a bit judgy. Actually, no, that's not. That's me being reflective. Because, dude, if your kids don't feel safe to tell you things, I mean, there's always those little things they're nervous about, especially when you want to talk about sex and stuff like that. They get uncomfortable. My son asked me what condiments meant the other day and why everyone laughed. I said, oh, probably because they meant condoms. They thought he said condoms. What are those? Then I told him. He regrets. He's like, why do I ask you questions? I'm like, because I'll answer you. But anyways, right? Like there's that natural uncomfortableness about coming to people with things, but really honestly with the big stuff for them, you know, if they're in a relationship and they're having trouble, they should be able to talk to you because you're their role model. You're their guide. You are the blueprint for what they, right? Like, what does a healthy relationship look like? You are what they've been looking at. So I think it's so important that you're included in those conversations, right? Absolutely. And if you're not, then I think the point isn't to go to teachers and say, hey, how you need to out my kid. No. This is the cue to you to do some self-reflection as to why your child isn't safe telling you things. And I'm as guilty as any parent. There have been some things I know my kids haven't felt they could bring to me. We've had to have those conversations, right? I'm not a perfect parent by any stretch. In fact, probably cautionary tale right here. But in a lot of ways, I just learn from my mistakes maybe. And this is one mistake I haven't made. I've managed to, I think, keep a really good open dialogue with my kids. So I don't know. Regardless of where you land, here's the Jesus alignment question though. Does this policy create more belonging for kids who are highly at risk, or does it create isolation? Or does it create a lack of safety? For me, it's a no-brainer. This policy does not make kids safer. It makes parents feel more comfortable at home that maybe their beliefs aren't being challenged and tested within the public system. But if that's how you feel, then you need to take your kids out of the public system. That's why there are private schools. So that you can, if you want ideology taught to your child, you need to go to the private schools. If you're in the public schools, they're going to be taught that other people believe different things than them. So like I can teach about religion without teaching religion, right? Simply acknowledging, yeah, you believe in Christ. Awesome. Great for you. You believe in, Muhammad. You believe in, Buddha. Well, I'm just, yeah. By saying, these are the tenets of this faith, these are the tenets of this faith, these are the tenets of this faith, discuss. That is not ideology indoctrination. That is simply informing humans that there is more than one way to see the world. And even if you want to believe that you are right and you are the only right and that is the only way to do things, you can't ignore the fact that you live in a world where other people believe differently. So I guess how you choose to engage with that is up to you. But I believe that Jesus would have been at the GSA meeting because we look at the people he hung out with. He hung out with the tax collectors, he hung out with the prostitutes, he hung out with people who had questionable life choices. He's the child of an unwed mother who was pregnant with him, right? He is a stepfather. Like, honestly, I have to plug in my computer here while we're talking. Right? Like, Jesus came from a very non-traditional family background himself, right? And so I don't understand why there's all this focus on, oh, the perfect nuclear family, and you must have a mother, and you must have a father. Well, obviously that's ideal, right? So I'm going to turn the computer as I slide over to plug myself in. But the reality is, the life that Jesus led was not a nuclear family, right? He was raised by a man who chose to love him, Joseph. And I don't think there's enough credit given to Joseph, honestly, especially at Christmas, right? As I fail to plug this into the wall. I hope you're not all seeing my bottom while I'm bent over doing this. That would be hilarious. Oh. All right. We plugged in. Do we have power? We have power. All right. Brilliant. Right? And I think the Jesus that I know and the Jesus that I read about in the New Testament, and because that's the only place you read about him, right? Unless you're Mormon and they have other texts about him too, but none of it contradicts the New Testament, so I'm just going to stick with that. I'm sorry. He would have said, come and sit down, have dinner with me. Let's hang out. Let's talk about your life. Right? He wouldn't have excluded these kids. He wouldn't have outed them, and he certainly wouldn't have put them in danger. Right. So the next one, compassionate action and selfless service. So compassion isn't just a feeling, right? It shows up in our budgets and our systems. So Alberta's budget highlights spending on education and supports, including funding lines for programs like AISH, right, and income supports. At the same time, independent analysts and education groups argue that the per-student funding and system capacity are not keeping pace with the real-world need, especially with rapid enrollment growth and class complexity, which I've talked about in many, many videos, right? So if you're going to reference Jesus publicly as the Minister of Education and Child Welfare, this is the guy. 60 kids died in care this year. Did you know that? 60 children died who were in the care of social services. Nobody's talking about this. Compassion? Oh, well, yeah, the majority of them were Indigenous. It was drug-related stuff. No, this is not compassion. This is not okay, right? So, if you're going to reference Jesus, people will ask, are we building systems that actually serve people well, especially children, disabled people, and families under strain? That would be what justice looks like. We live in a province where 1 out of every 4 children admitted to the hospital are malnourished. 1 out of 4. Where 1 out of every 10 children is suffering from food insecurity in their home. We are living in a world where AISH funding is being cut. And not only was it cut, what happened was the federal government said, hey, here's some extra money for you guys, $200 a month. And the Alberta government says, no, we'll take that. But you also have to fill out all this paperwork, which is going to cost you $500 to do. So my daughter had to spend $500 to lose $200 a month. Compassion? Right? We have all these surpluses, and they talk about, like, I admit, I'm a music teacher. I count to 4 for a living. Someone needs to explain this to me like I'm 5. If we're having all these bonuses and surpluses and the Heritage Fund, and then we have all these needs, why is there a line dividing the two, right? Isn't one supposed to help support the other? Isn't that the point? These are individuals who cannot fend for themselves. These aren't people who don't want to work, right? My daughter, she's not able to work in a meaningful way that would make a living that she could live on by any stand. I mean, she's able to work. She's able to be out and do volunteer things in the community. She's autistic. She's in her early 20s. She's very opinionated and loud and doesn't do well with elderly people. She's her own person, but like they kept putting her in a senior's home to serve water and things as a job, and that was not a good fit, right? She needs a job where she can be independent and do something predictable, like facing shelves. Like there are jobs, but that's not going to work for her because she doesn't have the ability to do that full time. That she just doesn't have the physical and emotional ability to maintain herself publicly that long. And she would have outbursts. She would be rude to customers. No, I mean, I love my daughter, but full-time work, it's just not for her. This is why we have AISH, right? Because there are people who have disabilities or things that happen to them that make them be disabled. We are all just one accident, or we could age into disability, right? This is all of us. And until it impacts you directly, if you don't care about things until it impacts you directly, I have a problem with that. Sorry, I just think that's selfish. And this is supposed to be selfless, right? Jesus would have been about compassionate action and selfless service. He would have made sure that the people on AISH had enough funding before he would give tax cuts to somebody else, right? And I'm not saying you shouldn't be giving tax cuts to entice business. We need business, right? But there's a responsibility there, right? If you are going to only give tax breaks and gifts to people that you benefit from, well, that's certainly not compassion and selfless service. That's quid pro quo, tit for tat. That's something else, right? That's a problem. That's what that is. A passion for justice, pardon me. Well, justice is not abstract, right? It shows up in how a province treats its lowest paid workers. It shows up in a lot of areas, right? Although Alberta's minimum wage has been frozen at $15 an hour since 2018, and labor groups argue this has crushed purchasing power during inflation, more recently, the government voted down a bill that would have increased it. You can argue economics either way, but the Jesus question in this is simple. Are the least powerful being protected, or are they being left behind? Right? And I'm certainly not in the lower demographic, but I'm certainly in one of the demographics that's being impacted and we all are. Our buying power is ridiculously terrible. When I moved to Airdrie in 2021, I could buy a bag of apples for $1.99. Today I put a bag in my Instacart for $8.98. That's not the most I paid for a bag of apples, right? I always joke about how I wish I could afford grapes. I don't understand. And I am certainly not low income compared to many, right? I'm paycheck to paycheck, but that's because life's been the way life's been, right? Not all teachers are. As I said, cautionary tale here. But our buying power is decreased significantly, right? Is that not a problem? Or do we just not care about it because it doesn't impact us directly, right? Jesus taught that we should be taking care of each other, right? He fed the thousands with bread and fish, right? You know, does this policy to not raise the minimum wage, does it in fact help people, or does it make things worse for people? Who does it help? Like, what was the one slide? It was like, maybe we need to stop asking, or people, saying you'd have more money if you didn't buy your coffee and your avocado on toast, and maybe start telling billionaires that maybe that if their people don't have a livable wage, they should have less yachts, right? Like, there's a double standard at play here, and it's not okay, right? Jesus also taught creative nonviolence and extravagant forgiveness, right? I love that. Creative nonviolence. I feel that that's an area I could excel in. Creative nonviolence. What are some interesting ways we can engage people and have these conversations without being mean and rude and all of those things? Let's just talk, right? How can we come to solutions without violence, right? And I love extravagance forgiveness because I don't know about you, I've certainly needed it in my life, right? And if you're perfect, well, then I don't know why you're watching this, because none of us are. And that's okay, because Jesus preached extravagant forgiveness if we followed him, right? Other people will find that through other ways, and I respect that, right? But let's just talk about that for a minute. So Jesus taught about this, he rejected coercion, he resisted domination, he challenged power without crushing people. He may have flipped some tables, but, he didn't ruin anybody's lives. Alberta's Critical Infrastructure Defence Act created significant penalties around interfering with so-called infrastructure, and civil liberties groups have warned it could chill peaceful protest. This isn't me endorsing vandalism or blockades. Harm is harm. I'm not okay with that. It's asking whether the state responds to social conflict with restraint, proportionality, and de-escalation, or with fear and punishment. When I went to the Alberta Next panel, I joked to my husband, I'm like, I have enough bail money in the account, right? Because the way the policies have been changed, protesting is now a risk. It wasn't 10 years ago. It shouldn't be a risk. We should be able to peacefully and loudly, I don't have a problem loud, but we shouldn't be interfering with other people's well-being while we're doing it. It's okay to make things, I guess the point is to be disruptive, right? The point of protest is to make a point by being loud and visible and causing some kind of chaos, but not chaos to the point where there's like damage to buildings or things. I'm thinking chaos and we tie up the premier's lines to the point where it just cuts everybody off like we did, right? Where we cause them some panic and force them to look at what actually, it's not forcing them to look at what they're doing. They're just doubling down because they believe they're right. Not the most intelligent response, honestly. But yeah, it's okay. Good and necessary trouble, not harm, is fine. And I think Jesus caused good and necessary trouble. Think about the flipping of the tables. That was necessary. Right? Think about the fact that he openly hung out with people that other people did not approve of, right? Absolutely, right? And finally, simple living and lavish generosity. Well, Jesus modeled humility. He warns against showy displays of righteousness. He doesn't need power or symbolism to prove authority. So when official government letters talk about the birth of Christ and the nativity in a message meant for everyone, while the government's choices are still debated around educational capacity, affordability, and who feels safe in schools, people notice the mismatch. Because lavish generosity isn't a paragraph in a letter. It's what you protect when it costs you something to protect it. There's more than one piece that matters here, right? The values often described with the 9 key teachings of Jesus aren't exclusively to Christianity. They aren't at all. Radical love, hospitality, compassionate action, justice, nonviolence, generosity, humility. These values show up across many faiths. When I teach religious study and I have the opportunity to do it, that's what I focus on. Okay, everybody has a holy book. What's yours? Ours is the Bible, Book of Mormon, Quran, right? Did you know the first 4 books of the Old Testament are the scriptures of the people who are Jewish? It's also part of the Muslim faith. We have this interconnectivity of texts, which is really cool, right? We talk about places of worship. What do we look like? Do we have temples? Do we have churches? Do we have meeting halls? What does that look like? We talk about a golden rule because every religion has some version of the do unto others as you would have done unto you rule, right? We talk about what we have in common. And the key tenets of many of these faiths are very, very similar, right? So when people look at this and they look at this letter, which concerns me, 2 things. One, I don't think Jesus would do what this government has done. I don't. I'm sorry. I really, honestly, I don't. I don't know what else to say about it. I don't. I can't imagine the Savior that I know standing up and saying, even though there are 3, at least, other ways that we could handle this situation within the laws that exist, I'm going to step out of it and I'm going to take away people's rights. I'm going to, notwithstanding cause. Because he isn't afraid of opposition. Because Jesus knows he's right. He's Son of God, right? So I guess there's some confidence in that when he makes a statement. He knows he's right, whereas as a human, I could very well be wrong. Happy for an opportunity to learn. But he wouldn't have fought it because there's legal ways to do it. And yes, there would have been challenges by the courts. And he would have been like, yeah, bring it. Because I'm on, right? Like, I'm right. I know what I'm doing. Challenge me, right? When you can't do that and you have to go around and do it in a sneaky way, Jesus wouldn't do that. Jesus was about transparency. Where in the Bible do you see anything about where he keeps things secret from other people? No, he shares his knowledge. He shares his compassion. He shares his gifts. I see none of that in the UCP really these days, right? Like, this isn't about business and economics. And yeah, so I'm talking about human cost here. What greater cost is there? Isn't the whole point of money and that to serve humanity, not for the other way around? Like, is the UCP, don't want to too many metaphors as far as maybe the golden calf, but are their priorities in alignment with the Savior's? And my heart tells me they're not. And so does my brain. And as somebody who loves Jesus and believes his teachings and tries to live them, although I admit I'm not perfect, and I'm okay with that because of the extravagant forgiveness that he offers, I can't just sit quietly when somebody says, oh yes, no, Jesus Christ this and Jesus Christ that. But that's almost, it's not blasphemy, it's not that strong, but it's inappropriate, right? It does not belong. It's a mismatch. And when people outside of the Christian faith are critical of this, they're dismissed because they're outside of the Christian faith. And I want you to look at this graph right here. Every one of those faiths up there and more could have written a letter that said something about the season, and you would have been outraged as Christians. Oh my goodness, they're bringing in Muslim law. Probably the same people who are upset that we're teaching Arabic numbers, right? But all numbers are Arabic. Oh my God. So where does this leave us? Well, this is where this leaves us. And to my friends who are firm believers in Christ as I am, whom I respect dearly, I challenge you with this question. Where does the line between church and state belong? We should have the rights to explore all of our own belief systems, as long as they're not harming other people. Does that give us the right to impose it on other people? Is that the point of mission work, to impose? No, it is not. It is to invite. The purpose of mission work is to invite. It is not to dictate. It is not to go in and say, this is the way it is and you are wrong and this is right. It is to say, hey, I found this really great way of living. I found this happiness. I found this peace. I'd love to share with you how I found it. And if you'd like to follow that path, please, I'm happy to walk with you. Nothing that the UCP government is doing aligns with that when it comes to issues with education, policing, social services, and healthcare. I won't speak to business. That is well out of my scope. That is well out of my realm. And I don't have a whole lot of information on how Jesus handled money. I really don't. I do want to leave with this, though. A few years back, I saw one of those movies on the crucifixion, and it really brought home to me something I hadn't thought about before. And it was the role of the Pharisees and the tight position that they had been put in. So who are the Pharisees? They're teachers, right? They're the most holy of the Jewish people. They know the law. They have it memorized. They embody the teachings of the Jewish faith. I believe there's like 603 rules. They know them all. Very legalistic society at that time too, right? And the Pharisees, they were very proud that they knew all these things, as they should be. I mean, if I could remember 603 rules, I'd be proud too. And they had a big responsibility, and that was for their people, the Jewish people, in a time where Rome was not being kind. And I feel like I'm teaching at school and I'm softening things, but we know what it was like. And I looking at how they had to manage the threat of riots and what that would have meant for the whole population, right? To me, when I saw that video, I went, to them, it looked like they were sacrificing one for the good of many, right? They're going to give Jesus to Pontius Pilate in exchange for the safety of their people. And that's a really uncomfortable thing to sit with for me, because I think it was wrong to crucify Jesus. I do. But I can kind of get that. Yeah, okay, one person versus many, that is a hard argument, right? And I don't know, I can't judge where they sat on that once I thought about that, because I'm like, they have a point, right? And I'm concerned that as Christians, we get so caught up in the rules and how we do it and how we think is the right way to do it, and that it's the only way to do it, and we lose sight of the bigger picture here, right? And I don't think we're in a situation where Christianity is being threatened. Not in the way that people would like you to believe. I think you're just as free to walk down the street and preach the gospel as you ever were. I mean, is the fact that there's people who believe different things and may question you on it a bad thing? I think it's just great. That's mission work. Let's go and talk to people, right? I'm not a person who's going to go door to door knocking as a missionary, even though I am a Mormon. I'm not going to do that. But if somebody says to me, why do you believe that? Or they notice that I'm different, or, why aren't you losing your mind over this? I'm like, well, because I have peace because of this. I have this faith. I have this relationship. I want to have this conversation. And if okay, yeah, that's nice. I'm like, awesome. If they want to know more, let's talk. But honestly, I mean, that's what Jesus did. He didn't go out and get in everybody's faces. He showed up, and if people wanted to hear him, they came to him, right? He met with the lowest common denominators of society, if you want to call them that. I'm just going to call them humans. He met with everyone, right? And I believe that our government is supposed to reflect those things. I would love it if our government reflected those values. Then I wouldn't have a problem with them saying, on Jesus Christ's birthday. But I'm like, it feels like hypocrisy to me. And maybe that's my overdeveloped sense of social justice because I'm neurodivergent. Hypocrisy hits me. And I'm just like, I don't get it. I don't get it. And I leave that with you there. Because maybe you do. And if you do, I'd sure love to hear about it. But that is all.